Our next panelist will be Grover Norquist. He is the president of Americans for Tax Reform, a coalition of taxpayer groups, individuals, and businesses opposed to higher taxes at the federal, state, and local levels. He serves on the board of directors of the National Rifle Association of America and the American Conservative Union. He has authored the book, Leave Us Alone, Getting the Government's Hands Off Our Money, Our Guns, Our Lives. He has worked with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, served as a campaign staff of various Republican platform committees, and served as executive director for both the National Taxpayers Union and the College Republicans. He holds a master's of business administration and Bachelor of Arts degree in economics, both from Harvard University. Thank you, Mr. Norquist.
Thank you. My written testimony was skillfully written by my wonderful staff. It's worth reading repeatedly, and I commend it to everyone as holiday gifts for loved ones. I'd like to make 3 observations today. The first is that all government costs money. Nothing is for free. Those of us who try and limit the cost and destructiveness of government sometimes divide government between the things that are vaguely mentioned in the Constitution, and we don't focus on those, and those things that are silly and destructive, and we focus only on the costs there. But even the worthwhile, important parts of government, national defense and the judicial system, cost money. And if we're going to focus on the costs of government, that means we should also keep an eye on costs of the legitimate functions of government. Those people who defended the Bush spending legacy, both of them, would sometimes say, well, if you don't count Iraq, he didn't spend all that much. But Iraq wasn't free. However useful or you thought it wasn't for free. It cost money. The French weren't paying for it. And the same thing is true for our prison system. It costs money, and we need to look at how to keep these costs down. I have 2 suggestions, and I think mandatory minimums sometimes run up the cost of incarceration. And 2 suggestions are, 1, sunsetting those laws that force government spending, and mandatory minimums force other parts of the government to spend a lot of money. If we would revisit these every 4 years and say they lapse, and then unless we look at them again, it would at least mean that they don't continue year after year without being looked at, debated, and refocused. After September 11th, I testified on the Senate side, the Judiciary Committee, on the Patriot Act, and they had this 300-page Patriot Act they were going to pass, and I said, I'm not a lawyer, but my suggestion is that you all read this first before voting on it, which the senators all politely laughed. They had no intention of reading it and every intention of passing it. I said, I understand that. Then sunsetted it 4 years. So we're passing it now as a political statement. Let's look in 4 years and see which were the useful bits and which were not useful and which were dangerous. And the same thing, I think, should be done with mandatory minimums. When heads are cool, when we're not in front of TV cameras saying that we're against a particular crime and proving it by putting a mandatory minimum in, let's take a look at it in 4 years again and again and again. Some of them you may want to keep, but some they want to reduce, some they want to eliminate. And the last thought is that one of the questions to ask is not whether there should be a mandatory minimum for certain federal crimes, but whether certain crimes should be dealt with by the federal government. Should they perhaps be state crimes? There's always the temptation for elected officials to go in front of the cameras and make something that the states are handling perfectly well a federal crime for political reasons. And I would argue for sunsetting federal crimes in the first place, because a lot of what's listed in the mandatory minimums could perfectly well be handled at the state level. If they wanted to have mandatory minimums, they could or they couldn't. So there's a separate question of which crimes actually need to be federal crimes, national crimes, as opposed to local and state crimes. Thank you.